Good morning. Welcome to Molecule Time. We're going to talk about those kind of molecules that make up your lunch, the kind that you read on a food label, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and we're going to throw just a little bit about nucleic acids in here, but come back to them much more later. So this is a link if you want to look for some decent healthy eating advice. Well, there's a million different diet advice sources out there, and some can be a little dangerous, and some are well-meaning. But we're going to talk about lots of kind of molecules. I'm going to focus on sugar a little bit because it's turning out to be the great villain in your diet. Okay, so organic molecules. First, you realize that all this stuff we talk about is the product of human beings trying to describe the universe that they're in this case, the molecular universe. So what defines an organic molecule as opposed to an inorganic molecule is human beings. So there are some things that are for sure. All organic molecules contain carbon, for instance. And then there are some things that are maybe a little shaky because there are some molecules like carbon dioxide that has a whole lot to do with living things. It has carbon in it, but we humans don't classify it as an organic molecule. To make a long story short, the organic molecules are those that fit into 4 human-described categories: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. And if you don't fit into one of those categories too well, like carbon dioxide doesn't, then we say you're inorganic. But guess what? Carbon dioxide doesn't care what we call it. It is what it is. It does what it does. So emphasis again that all this is human kind of stuff. So why is carbon become such an important atom in organic molecules? There's 92 natural elements out there. Why did carbon become like the central atom of organic molecules? Well, it again has to do with valence electrons. Carbon has 4. What difference does that make? It can therefore share each of those 4 and form 4 covalent bonds with other things. What's good about that? Well, they're strong, these covalent bonds. And the chemistry of life is quite complex. And it's not going to happen with simple molecules. And so what have evolved are complex molecules that are involved in the chemistry of life. And those complex molecules are not going to be built with atoms that can only bond to one thing. And so that's why its ability to form complex but also stable because of those strong bonds. That's why carbon's kind of the star. Okay, now you're also going to find hydrogen and oxygen in every organic molecule, but we focus on carbon, and it's for this reason. Sorry, I had to blow a hair off the screen. So all these organic molecules are produced in cells, like our cells, right? But it's chemistry. They're chemicals. Some of them can also be produced in a test tube in the lab. And I only say some because some of them are so complex that we humans have not been able to make them, in a lab. But it's still just chemistry. So all these 92 elements that exist in our universe naturally, not counting the man-made ones, of all of those, about 96+% of you and I and every other living organism are just these 4 atoms. And those are the main ones that we find in organic molecules. If you throw a little sulfur in there and a little phosphorus, now we're up to about 98% of what you are is just those 4 atoms, rearranged in all kinds of different ways to make those molecules that we call organic. Okay, so how are these molecules put together and taken apart? Well, remember I told you that the red type in these PowerPoint notes are going to be straight from the EOC syllabus. So when it gets to EOC time, you're going to focus on those. This is the kind that tells you that items, those are test questions, will not refer to intermolecular forces, right? We already said that that's not really true because hydrogen bonds are those, and we're going to bump into hydrogen bonds in just a little bit, right? But it also tells you they're not going to ask you about hydrolysis or dehydration synthesis. But I'm going to ask you about those because these are honors biology things that you really need to be introduced to. They're not that complicated, and we're going to talk about them all year long. Because we're going to be talking about nothing but chemicals basically all year long. We talk about living things made of chemicals. So here is some vocab now, the beginning of lots of vocab in this unit. Monomers. Well, the mono part of that you're familiar with means one, right? What's a monomer? Well, it's a single molecule, obviously, right? And if you put a bunch of them together, you would then get a polymer. If you put just two of them together, you would get a dimer. Makes sense, right? Di for two. You're not going to see that word too much, but polymer and monomer you are going to see all the time. They're going to be in your organic molecule questions, and so you need to know simply what they mean. Here's another one in the ballpark. Macromolecule. What's that mean? Well, macro means bigger. So how big do you have to be called a macromolecule? Well, the monomers can be called that, and certainly the polymers would be called macromolecules. Unfortunately, there's a lot of vocab here for you to wade through. So back to dehydration synthesis and hydrolysis. You notice both of these words have a water kind of prefix, suffix, root word in there, hydro. So they both have to do with water, obviously. One of them is putting things together. Synthesis implies putting together. The other is splitting apart. Lysis is a prefix or sometimes a suffix, as we'll see, or a root word that means split. So hydrolysis literally means water splitting, and this dehydration synthesis literally means putting things together, taking out water. Dehydration means losing water. So let's look at them specifically, right? Here's a dehydration synthesis reaction, sometimes just called a dehydration reaction, right? In which these two pieces, one of them is already a polymer, and one of them is a monomer, but they're going to get put together to make a longer polymer, and they're going to do that by losing water. How do they lose water, so to speak? Well, one of them loses this part of water, and the other loses that part of water. That OH is called a hydroxyl, and with a hydrogen, you have water. You have made a new molecule here. This is also a new molecule. This is obviously then a chemical reaction, right? Symbolized by this arrow, a chemical reaction takes some kind of chemicals and turns them into different kinds of chemicals. Here is how you build all your organic molecules that make up you, right? When your muscles get bigger, for instance, they get bigger by you putting together pieces of what? Pieces of your lunch, right? To make new molecules that then literally become part of you. So dehydration synthesis is a key chemistry reaction in growth. So what happened to your lunch when you ate it? Well, lots of it had to get split up. This is hydrolysis, and it's exactly the opposite of dehydration synthesis. If you see the places where these two up here lost an OH and an H to get put together to make that, then the exact opposite process happens in hydrolysis. So these are going to get split apart, and so will a water molecule. So hydrolysis is also literally the splitting apart of water, but what we're focusing on is actually, along with the splitting apart of water, comes the splitting apart of an organic molecule, such that one of them contains part of what used to be a water molecule, and the other one contains the other part, but now they are separate from each other. Again, different chemicals, therefore, again, this is chemistry.